I really do not like Hollywood. It is not for me. The business really scares me. I understand that I'm a part of that business and I enjoy my kind of interactions with it. But that said, I am always looking for ways to kind of remove myself from it, to kind of just live as normal a life as possible. I've seen so many people come before me and lose themselves, and I've had friends that I've grown up with that aren't friends of mine anymore because they've lost themselves to this business. And I just am really, really keen to focus on what makes me happy, which is my family, it's my friends, it's my carpentry, my golf. My relationship is the thing that I keep most sacred. I don't talk about it. I try my best to keep it as private as possible. We both feel very strongly that that is the healthiest way for us to move on as a couple. You'll never see me at an award show that I don't have to be at. I'm never going to a red carpet event that I'm not in the film of, you know? I don't want the attention when I don't need it. But there's a quote from Billie Jean King that's on the stand at her stadium in New York that says, "Pressure is a privilege." And that is so true.
Oh, the Oscars. And I know what you're going to ask, but Sean, it's been weeks. The Oscars are irrelevant. To which I couldn't agree more. Once a mainstream staple of pop culture is now nothing more than a blatant, obvious circle jerk of fake awards, DEI pandering, political elitism, and irrelevancy. It has been over 45 days since Hollywood spent $60 million to stage a ceremony that pulled in just 17 million viewers across both ABC and Hulu. The audience was down 9% from last year, which makes it the lowest since 2022, which was both post-COVID and pre-strikes. For the industry's biggest annual sermon about its own importance, that is really not the flex they were hoping for. And because the usual shills will squeal that social engagement was up, yes, social impressions were up. Great. Nobody cares. That only means Hollywood is getting better at manufacturing clips and chatter and self-referential fluff.
Fluffer.
Whoa, hold on. Did you just say fluffer? That sounds naughty.
Relax. It's actually a term in the film industry for fluffing pillows.
Sure, for pillows.
While fewer people actually sit down to the show itself. It's like a stripper killing it on the flyer and then dancing to 3 confused accountants. That is not renewed relevance because it is a smaller crowd with a better social team once adjusted for inflation. Let's not forget we are just a few short years from the Oscars moving to YouTube. That is the trajectory, and well... The Academy was founded in 1927 with the first Oscar ceremony in May of 1929, honoring films from 1927 and 1928. In 1926, Louis B. Mayer sat down with a group of MGM executives and decided that the film industry needed an organization that would promote the business, mediate labor disputes, and protect the town's image from outside pressure. That is what the Academy was designed to do from day one. While it was never intended to just honor the best work, it was really there to promote the business, to mediate labor and protect the image while statues were the marketing. 100 years later, we are watching all 3 of those original functions fail at the same time. The business is shrinking, the labor is collapsing, the image is filthy. Fast forward even 70 years to 1996 when the Academy handed Best Picture to Braveheart. The same year, Babe, Sense and Sensibility, Apollo 13, and The Postman were on the ballot. 1996 was also peak theatrical Hollywood. You had Independence Day, Twister, Mission Impossible, The Rock, Jerry Maguire, Scream, Fargo, and Trainspot. Original IP, star vehicles, adult dramas, comedies that opened wide and made money. Genre films with real budgets and real marketing. The business had a middle. The audience was real. The ceremony meant something because the industry underneath it was alive. Now, jump 30 years later to 2026. That is where we are. 100 years after the Academy was founded and 30 years after the last version of Hollywood that actually mattered. You see, I came into this business in 2013 fresh out of college when the machine still looked expensive and ambitious and alive. In 2013 alone, you had American Hustle, Captain Phillips, Gravity, Her, Nebraska, Prisoners, 12 Years a Slave, Dallas Buyers Club, The Wolf of Wall Street, and Blue Jasmine. You also had commercial hits like Now You See Me and We're the Millers, making real money without needing to be superhero sludge or a 9-figure franchise appendage. The business still looked big enough to support adult dramas, thrillers, comedies, star vehicles, and original films without treating every miss like a berry. That version is gone, and the less there is underneath, the more the ceremony actually has to carry. The Oscars were supposed to be the cleanest annual argument for Hollywood's importance. This is the one night the town gets to put on a tuxedo, dim the lights, and tell the advertisers and agencies and studios and guilds and buyers and the public that it still owns a giant piece of the culture, all while stepping over the homeless just outside the theater doors. So then the numbers come back smaller, and that is why ratings matter. The ceremony is not just handing out fake trophies, it is performing strength, and that performance keeps looking weaker.
And that secret I shall take to my grave.
Calculon, no!
Now that's acting. Calculon really Shatnered the hell out of that scene.
That alone would be enough to laugh at, but the merit story is even funnier. The Oscars have never been a clean scoreboard where the best work rises on pure artistic excellence. They are a campaign machine, a politics machine, a self-image machine, and a very expensive social ritual where Hollywood votes for the version of itself it most wants to admire in that particular year. Merit is the bedtime story that they tell peasants like you and me. That's like a beauty pageant for narcissists where everyone pretends the crown was earned in combat. If you want older proof, start with Shakespeare in Love beating Saving Private Ryan. That upset has been Oscar folklore for years, and multiple retrospectives tie it directly to Harvey Weinstein's aggressive awards campaign. That's like bringing a real movie to a contest run by Harvey Weinstein, then acting shocked when the handjob wins.
Donna Gelati, Harvey Weinstein, Edward Zwick, and Mark Norman producers.
This is the first Oscar for David Parfit, Donna Gelati, Harvey.
And there is Crash beating Brokeback Mountain, which has spent 20 years living in the public memory as one of the Academy's dumbest acts of self-exposure. That one did not just look wrong, it looked scared. It looked like an institution voting for the choice it could live with socially, rather than the one it wanted to defend artistically.
I am not gay. I have relationships with women and sex with men.
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
Is how this body works when it gets nervous. So no, I do not buy some holy tribunal of artistic judgment. It rewards campaigning, trend alignment, political comfort, moral vanity, industry fashion, and whatever lets Hollywood feel flattering things about itself in that moment. Call it identity politics, call it taste politics, call it status politics. The label barely matters, but the pattern does. If anybody still wants to pretend the awards story is built on pure merit, look at the money around the race. Last year's Oscar winner Anora cost $6 million to make, and Neon spent $18 million on the marketing, distribution, and the awards campaign. Director Sean Baker has frequently discussed the financial precarity of independent filmmaking, noting that even with critical acclaim, he has often felt broke or struggled to secure funding throughout his career. So the $18 million did not go to the person who made the film, but rather to the apparatus that sells the film to voters. Where the fuck does that make sense? 3 times the production cost just to push the movie through the machine, shape the narrative, flood the zone, and tell the industry what it was supposed to celebrate. And the apparatus worked. Anora won 5 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actress, Best Original Screenplay, and Best Editing. Sean Baker personally took home 4 statues in one night. The film grossed $40 million globally and became one of the lowest grossing Best Picture winners in Academy history. $40 million in theaters, $18 million in a campaign spend. The industry paid almost half of what the public did on tickets just to push the movie into Best Picture. And it is worth looking at what the industry picked. A movie about a stripper who marries the son of a Russian oligarch, gets beaten up by his family's fixers, and ends up with Mikey Madison pledging herself as an ally to the sex worker community? That is the story Hollywood stood up and said is the story we want to put forward that year. This is what they are proud of. This is what they want the country to sit through on a Sunday night in March. No, and fuck you. Modern feminism has destroyed Hollywood and is very well on its way to destroying the West. Think about what the Oscars are actually voting on. When the Academy votes Best Picture, they are telling the whole country what Hollywood thinks is worth celebrating, worth normalizing, and what counts as a story America should be rooting for. That is a moral posture. So the first lie is the awards are earned. The second lie is that the people handing out those awards have the moral standing to tell you what's right. Like a lot of people, I grew up watching the Oscars because I loved movies. The ceremony made real films feel important and elegant and bigger than ordinary life. It made the business look like a cathedral for art. Then I worked in the business for 10 years, and like a lot of people before me, I found out that the cathedral had sewage in the walls.
Excuse me.
This is not just rumors or isolated weirdos. It is a real workplace full of predators, opportunists, adulterers, creeps, enablers, bullies, cons, and cowards. People humiliating assistants because they could. People destroying marriages like it was cardio. People protecting grotesque behavior because the grotesque person is still useful. Not everybody, but enough people to poison the place.
Before we begin, I just want to congratulate Harvey and his wife Georgina on the birth of their new baby boy.
Thank you.
Harvey gave us just what we needed, another him.
Harvey Weinstein was not some bizarre one-off. His rise and fall was central to the wave of allegations that fueled Me Too. He was one of the clearest public examples of what Hollywood tolerated for years while the machine was still making people rich.
Oh, you like working for bad guys? I'll show you, bad guy. Now you touch it. You know what to touch.
Banana!
Winning awards and congratulating itself about art. Time's Up launched on January 1st, 2018 in direct response to that larger public detonation. That was the town getting caught being exactly what a lot of people inside it already knew it was. Joss Whedon fits the same hypocrisy file, except his version is worse in one specific way in that he built his entire brand on feminism. This was the guy who created Buffy the Vampire Slayer, stood on stages talking about empowering women, and got praised by the press for decades as a progressive champion of female characters. Then multiple actors and collaborators publicly accused him of misconduct and abusive behavior.
Jog on.
It's funny how it all became public when it didn't have a choice. Hollywood has a long history of covering ugly conduct in prestige, influence, and professional protection until the smell gets so bad the public can no longer ignore it.
Smashing, Basil. Cool. This coffee smells like shit.
Weinstein was not the beginning, he was just the one who got too famous to bury. The list is long, and it keeps getting longer. Danny Masterson, Bill Cosby, Allison Mack, Jonathan Majors, Kevin Spacey, James Franco, Armie Hammer, Ezra Miller, Shia LaBeouf, Chris Noth, Ansel Elgort, Jared Leto, Steven Seagal, Marilyn Manson, TJ Miller, Amber Turd, Timothy Busfield, Asia Argento, who ironically was one of the most visible accusers during Me Too, until she was subsequently accused of sexually assaulting actor Jimmy Bennett in a hotel room when he was 17. She settled with him for $380,000 while publicly denying the allegation. And if anybody thinks this is historical, here's the most recent example. Ricky Garcia is a former Disney star, 28 years old, who appeared on Best Friends Whenever and was in the boy band Forever in Your Mind. Just last week, tied to the premiere of a new docuseries called Boy Band Confidential, he went public with his account of being groomed and sexually abused starting at the age of 12. By his former manager, Joey Hart. He described being treated as a sexual plaything who could be passed around among people in the business, with assaults happening dozens of times during his teenage years. Gross. He previously won a multi-million-dollar sexual abuse lawsuit against Hart. The docuseries also revisits Lou Pearlman, the manager who built NSYNC and the Backstreet Boys and was later imprisoned for fraud before dying behind bars, and what he did to the kids under his control. Lance Bass of NSYNC is in the same series, warning that predators are everywhere in the business and that young performers need family, lawyers, and protection that his generation did not have. Gross. And that is not 2017 retrospective coverage because it is now April 2026. That is a docuseries that premiered just last week. So if I were to watch the Oscars now, I would only be reminded of an industry that protected film for decades, and still does, then keeps asking to be treated like a sacred cultural institution because it knows how to put famous people under flattering lights. That disconnect matters. The business wants credit for art, immunity for rot, applause for politics, and public reverence for a conscience it has repeatedly failed to earn. It wants people to look at the gowns, the speeches, the tears, the hashtags, and the orchestra while forgetting what this place has rewarded, hidden, normalized, and excused when the right people were still profitable.
Get the out of here.
Taking his public blowouts with the press to a whole new level.
Ironically, if we take all that away for a moment, there's still the labor reality happening in real time, but especially in Los Angeles. Jamie Lee Curtis has described the current environment as desperate, with very little work available, and said actors who once led films and TV series are now willing to tape for small parts. That is not an anonymous Reddit post from some failed background extra parked outside a Burbank Target. That is Oscar winner Jamie Lee Curtis describing a business where recognizable people are now chasing scraps.
First, the bad news. 87% of this country suffers from digestive issues like occasional irregularity.
The Wall Street Journal just published what amounts to a death certificate. And something I already mentioned in my video, No More Bullshit. On-location production days in Los Angeles dropped to 19,000 in 2025 alone. Television went from 18,000 shoot days in 2021, post-COVID, to 6,000 in 2025. That is a 65% collapse. Feature films went from 3,000 to 2,000. 42,000 plus workers have left the industry between 2022 and right now. A 30% drop in employment across every job category that actually makes movies and television. Actors, carpenters, costume makers, editors, everyone. The Wall Street Journal compared Hollywood to Detroit after the auto industry collapsed. Corporate headquarters still in the city, actual work done everywhere else. That is the Access Media shill of record, looking at the numbers and saying the comparison is accurate. And if that is what the numbers look like for the workforce, look at what happened to one of the biggest production companies in the business. Jar Jar Abrams just gutted Bad Robot, the company behind the most notorious mystery box, unfinished, rush slot work in Hollywood. Lost, the Kurtzman Star Trek, 4 Mission Impossible films, nearly 30 years as one of the most viable production banners in the business, is shutting down the LA office entirely and moving to New York, all while cutting staff across the board. The guy who was once known as Spielberg's heir apparent to a new generation just packed up and left LA. When someone at that altitude shrinks their operation and leaves town, it is a forecast of a storm long brewing, and if Bad Robot is the production company data point, then Disney is the conglomerate data point. Last week, Variety reported that Disney CEO Josh D'Amaro cut 1,000 jobs across multiple divisions in what the company called a move to streamline operations. The entire home entertainment team got cut, led by executive director Chris Bess. The entire EPK team got cut, including director of creative content Natalie Clunas. Dustin Sandoval, SVP of global digital marketing, a 16-year Disney veteran who ran the digital campaigns for Avatar 2 and Avengers Endgame, out. Steve Nuckols, who oversaw the print campaigns on nearly every Disney release for 25 years, out. Marvel got cut across film, television, comics, franchise, finance, and legal. D'Amaro described the cuts as building to what he called a more agile and technologically enabled workforce, 3 months after Disney killed its OpenAI partnership. That is the public watching in real time as the most visible media conglomerate on the planet takes a shit on its own workforce without even calling it throwing mud. That desperation does not stop with CEOs and actors and franchise ruiners, because even when the work does exist, look at what it actually costs the people doing it. It is a brutal and toxic place to work. Long days, crushed weekends, bodies run into the ground, home lives wrecked, crew expected to treat physical exhaustion like proof of character. Whole careers built on being told to prove you want it badly enough to tolerate conditions no sane person should tolerate. Hollywood has always been very good at dressing up exploitation as passion. And this already blew up once. The 2023 strikes gutted people. Writers and actors slashed spending, burned through savings and piled up debt to survive. Crew got hammered. Caterers shuttered. vendors laid off staff, prop houses sold inventory or shut down. Small businesses around the business got dragged into the blast radius. That was less than 3 years ago. Hollywood has no issue romanticizing pain when somebody else is paying for it, and even now the labor picture is still not finished. That is not the profile of a healthy machine. That is a business begging for applause while the wiring is still very much exposed. And while the workforce bleeds and the production companies downsize, California's response to the fiscal crisis is to try and tax billionaires out of existence. The 2026 Billionaire Tax Act, which is a one-time 5% wealth tax on every California resident worth $1 billion or more. So, Larry Page left, Sergey Brin left, Peter Thiel left, Travis Kalanick left, Don Henke left, and, well, Steven Spielberg left. 6 billionaires and $27 billion in potential tax revenue gone before the ink was even dry. Brin is currently spending $20 million to fund countermeasures. 2 billionaire-backed PACs launched to kill the proposal. Gavin Newsom, California's own scumbag governor, publicly vowed to defeat it, all while spending $60,000 of his own campaign funds to buy his own book. You literally cannot make this shit up. It is a state so desperate, it is chasing its own wealth out the door, and the sad part is people keep voting for it. Days after the announcement that Spielberg was leaving, he went public, warning Hollywood that movies will run out of gas if all the industry makes is known branded IP and franchise films, saying there's nothing more important than giving the audience visual stories, but that the business needs to tell more original ones. This is the same guy who gave us Saving Private Ryan and E.T., positioning himself as the voice of reason after a 50-year career of building the exact machine he's now warning about. When the people who built the model start publicly distancing from it, the model is fucking over. And you are still looking for an investor to invest in all of this? Why? That is why I have no patience for the annual post-Oscar fake uplift. A shrinking audience is not a comeback. A desperate work picture is not a comeback. A place with decades of publicly documented abuse, vanity, cowardice, political fashion, campaign manipulation, and professional filth does not magically become noble because famous people clap for each other in formal wear for 3 hours. The Oscars now feel less like an awards body and more like a mood ring for whatever version of virtue, trend, guilt, ideology, image management, and social performance Hollywood wants to advertise about itself that year. The point is not even that every winner is wrong, but that the institution increasingly looks like it is voting for the preferred reflection in the mirror. That's no different than the industry giving itself a handjob in the mirror and calling it discernment.
No idea how much I appreciate you helping me out.
So back to this year's Oscar winner. Paul Thomas Anderson proved what I just said. He stood on stage, accepted 3 Oscars for a $140 million political pro-Antifa film about revolutionaries and white supremacists, and apologized to his kids' generation for the housekeeping mess that he left. In his world, he is handing off to them. That is a guy who put political conviction on screen, cashed the awards for it, and performed the apology from the podium. Sometimes that means rewarding campaign muscle. Sometimes that means rewarding guilt. Sometimes that means rewarding whatever makes the room feel current, approved, and morally attractive to itself. That is why people laugh at the winners. That is where this betrayal sits for me. A televised coping ritual for an industry that still thinks a spotlight can disinfect decay. So what is the point here? What does this all mean? Why am I taking a shit on the same industry I am trying to help at the indie level? But Sean, you sound so angry and bitter. Well, when other people's money is being burned, I have reason to be. The filmmaker is not the industry. The filmmaker is the one getting lied to it by. If you are grinding right now, if you are trying to raise money for your first film, if you are trying to survive inside this thing, you are watching the Oscars. Then somewhere in the back of your head, you are treating it like proof that the destination is real. That if you work hard enough, sacrifice enough, lose enough sleep, wreck enough relationships, burn through enough savings, and prove you want it badly enough, that there is something at the top worth arriving at.
You sure about that? You sure about that? You sure about that?
There isn't. Not anymore. The top of this business just threw itself a $60 million party and couldn't get enough people to watch. The labor force is desperate. The campaign spending dwarfs the art. The moral record is public and it is disgusting. Understand that the people inside the Dolby room are still clapping for themselves like none of that is happening 4 feet from the stage. That is what making it looks like in 2026, and there is no going back. So the question is not whether the Oscars are broken, but rather why are you still wrecking yourself to get closer to something that does not work anymore for the people who are already inside it? That is not me telling you to quit. That is me telling you to stop confusing motion with destination. Because if the destination is this, you need a better reason to keep moving than someday I'll be in that room. That room is on fire.
This is fine. I'm okay with the events that are unfolding currently.
Now, if you are trying to raise money for your first film, everything I just said is not culture commentary. It is what your investor sees before you ever open your mouth. You are walking into a conversation asking someone to put real money into a shrinking market. No serious person invests into a shrinking market without a very specific reason to believe you and your project is the exception. So fuck all with the I believe in this story, because that is not a reason. You are asking someone to fund a product in a business where the most celebrated example of success, an Oscar campaign, cost 3 times what the actual film costs to make. That tells an investor the winning conditions have nothing to do with the quality and everything to do with how much you can spend after the product is already finished. Or, because it's Hollywood, who can give the best reach arounds on the casting couch. That is a business where the post-production sales costs can eat the entire return before anyone sees a dollar back. You are asking someone to trust an industry that cannot keep its own workforce employed, cannot resolve its own labor contracts, and has a public record of protecting people who literally belong in prison.
You really are 18, aren't you?
Yes.
You gotta show me ID.
That is not an environment where an outsider with money feels protected, and you are asking them to do all this in a business where the decision makers at the top pick winners based on political comfort, campaign muscle, and self-image, not commercial performance or artistic quality. So even if your film is great, the system that determines visibility and prestige is not selecting for what you built. It is selecting for what makes the room feel good about itself. That is what the Oscars look like from a financing side. A risk profile. The old way of doing this is finished. You do not need a Hollywood connection to build your film. You do not need a manager at a known agency to validate your project. You do not need someone who knows people at a film festival or a market to tell you your package is ready. What you need is someone who has a fundamentally different skill set than anything the film industry teaches, rewards, or even recognizes today. The refusal to acknowledge that difference is the single most expensive mistake independent filmmakers make when they try to raise money. The people who prepare you for that conversation from inside the industry know it doesn't work, because if it did, their clients would stop coming back. Every single person on your side of the table is paid to keep you optimistic long enough to stay in the business with them. That is why hiring outside the industry is so vital. Every piece of evidence points to the same structural problem. The industry evaluates itself. When you go to raise money, you are stepping outside that closed system for the first time. You are approaching somebody who does not care about your generic pitch. They only care about whether their money comes back with a return and what protects them if it doesn't. The film industry does not train people to answer that question. It trains people to make films, to sell films, to package films, and to circulate inside a network where everyone shares the same assumptions about what matters.
Fuck this.
Those assumptions are not wrong for making a movie, but they are wrong for raising money from someone who also looks at real estate or biotech, private credit, and 40 other places to park the same dollar. So when you hire from inside the industry to prepare your fundraising approach, you are asking the seller side of the market to prepare your presentation to the buyer side. That person knows what looks good to other filmmakers. They do not know what looks dangerous, incomplete, or unprotected to someone who deploys capital for a living across multiple asset classes. That's not a quality judgment about industry professionals. The skills don't transfer because the questions are different. So if nobody on your team has actually ever raised or secured private equity financing, then nobody on your team knows what the investment side is looking for, what it rejects on site, or why. And when your investor's money does not come back, you lose the house, the savings, the marriage, the 5 years, the next project, and the relationship with the person who trusted you with their capital. None of what I just told you is opinion.
Stop whining. Your kids are soft.
You lack discipline. Well, I've got news for you. You're mine now. You belong to me. You're not gonna have your mommy stand behind you anymore and wipe your little tushes. Oh, no. It's time now to turn this mush into muscles.
These are documented patterns with decades of research behind them. So, here are the lessons. Lesson 1. Institutions under pressure increase ceremony, not performance. Meyer and Rowan's foundational work in institutional theory established that organizations adopt formal structures not for operational effectiveness, but to maintain legitimacy. Their concept of decoupling describes what happens when an institution's visible ceremonies, policies, rituals, displays of competence disconnect from what the organization actually does. The finding that matters is when that gap widens and the organization does not close it by improving operations. Meyer and Rowan's foundational work in institutional theory established that organizations adopt formal structures not for operational effectiveness, but to maintain their legitimacy. Their concept of decoupling describes what happens when an institution's visible ceremonies, like policies and rituals, displays of competence, are disconnected from what the organization actually does. The finding that matters is when that gap widens or the organization does not close it by improving operations. It closes by intensifying the ceremony. Proposition 5 of their framework states directly that the more an organization's structure is derived from institutional myths, the more it maintains elaborate displays of competence, satisfaction, and good faith. Proposition 6 adds that these organizations actively minimize inspection and valuation by both internal managers and external constituents. The formal structure becomes the product, the actual work becomes something the institution protects from scrutiny, not something it subjects it to. And lesson 2, winner-take-all markets systematically attract too many entrants who face negligible odds of positive return. If you are familiar with Frank and Cook, their research documented that markets where reward depends on relative rank rather than absolute performance generate two forms of waste. The first is overentry. A disproportionate number of people are drawn into the competition because the visible size of the top prizes distorts individual cost-benefit calculations. Each new entrant reduces the odds for everyone already competing, but that cost is ignored because it falls on other people. The second is positional arms racing. Competitors are compelled to make costly investments just to maintain relative standing, investments that cancel each other out, and produce no net gain. A 2021 study on professional tennis, published in the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, confirmed that aspirants are drawn to highly skewed earnings distributions the same way lottery gamblers are drawn to jackpots, and that this attraction systematically entices participants with modest abilities and negligible chances of earning positive returns to keep investing in the competition. That is the problem your materials either solve or prove. That is the work I do at Wrap Consulting. What is your risk-adjusted project profile? You are the future of this industry. The days of old and the days of gatekeepers are over. Return that shit to sender.